Two newspapers now have come out and called for Donald Trump to resign, not for impeachment, but for him actually right now, this very minute, to step down. The first was the Connecticut Post, and this was from the editorial board. This is the official voice of the newspaper, and this is, by the way, a Hearst newspaper, so this is part of a large chain. But they say it's not clear how much worse the Ukraine scandal will get. The summary of the phone call was released by the White House without need for a subpoena, but it's apparently abridged. So that was my point, the ellipses, and does not represent all the whistleblower complaint that set the issue in motion. It's easy to imagine that what we don't know could be much worse than what we do. But what we do know is enough. And because it's from the president himself, there's no reason to question its veracity. This is the point. You know, Trump's toadies on TV this weekend were all saying, well, it's all secondhand. No, this transcript is actually firsthand. These are Trump's own words. Anyhow, but back to the Connecticut Post. What we do know, this is ctpost.com. You can find this, by the way. What we do know is enough, and because it's from the president himself, there's no reason to question its veracity. There's no going back from here. The long, bumpy ride of the Trump era may have turned a corner, but it's nowhere near over. So they're calling for him to step down. The headline is editorial : President Trump needs to step down. That was on Friday. And then yesterday, the editorial board of the St. Louis Times-Dispatch came out and said the same thing. This is stltoday.com. They say, make no mistake. First of all, they start out trying to throw a bone to the Republicans and acknowledging that Trump his campaign just did a $10 million ad buy with an ad that says that Joe Biden was withholding aid to Ukraine until they fired a prosecutor who was investigating his son Hunter. Now, that prosecutor was not, in fact, investigating his son Hunter. That investigation had happened a year or two before, and was over and done with, and they didn't find anything, as the current prosecutor has said for the record. He talked to CNN over the weekend, in fact. But this lying ad of Donald Trump's is literally on TV all across the nation right now as we speak. So the editorial board addresses that, and they address it in a way that, frankly, Joe Biden is going to have to address. They say, make no mistake, there's a troubling coincidence between former Vice President Joe Biden's intervention in 2014 to urge the ouster of Ukraine's chief prosecutor and son Hunter Biden's appointment to the board of a gas company owned by a corrupt, Russia-friendly Ukrainian oligarch. Hunter Biden received upwards of $50,000 a month in that role, a shocking change of fortunes for someone who had just been dismissed from the Navy Reserve for testing positive for cocaine. If Joe Biden was involved in illegality, let the Justice Department initiate an investigation and follow leads. But so far, 5 years after these developments, investigators seem not to have uncovered prosecutable violations. So that's the, throw a bone to the dog part of it. But then they go on. This is the St. Louis Times-Dispatch. Then they go on, juxtaposed with Trump's inexplicable decision before July to suspend nearly $400 million in aid to Ukraine, there's more than ample justification for the House of Representatives to proceed with its impeachment inquiry. How far must a president go in betraying his country before Republicans finally declare that he no longer represents their values? How much crisis, chaos, and scandal can Republicans, exhausted from constantly defending him, tolerate before they decide enough is enough? The time has come. Again, this is from the editorial board. This is the official voice of this newspaper, the St. Louis Times-Dispatch, no bleeding liberal publication. The time has come for Republicans to stand up for the Constitution, stand up for America, and tell Trump to step down. Now, that's the message, by the way, that numerous newspapers across the country and Barry Goldwater and Everett Dirksen conveyed to Richard Nixon. Before this even gets to a vote, resign. And Nixon was like, okay, I'll do it. I don't think Trump's going to, but, expect this. So just to recap, Donald Trump has pressured the president of Ukraine to intervene in our 2020 election, next year's election, on Trump's behalf. And we have the transcript. This is not secondhand stuff. We have the transcript. he urged a foreign country to intervene in the 2016 election. Russia, if you're listening, right? Remember that? That in and of itself should be an impeachable offense. No president in the history of the United States has ever asked a foreign country to help him get elected. He told foreign officials, specifically Lavrov and Lavrov is a Russian foreign minister, and the Russian ambassador, whose name has escaped me. He told them he outed an Israeli intelligence officer. He burned an intelligence asset who was tracking down ISIS. And now we've learned just in the last few days that he said to them, you guys intervening in the election to help me out, and presumably what he's talking about specifically was not hacking voting machines. Presumably what he was talking about was releasing Hillary Clinton's emails, but who knows? But basically he said, you guys intervening in the election to help me out, that's just fine. All is forgiven. Don't worry, because we do the same thing at other people's elections. And, in fact, we have. But that doesn't justify Trump asking for this kind of help and welcoming this kind of help. That means that our ugly past has become our ugly present.